The American activist Noam Chomsky once said something along the lines of, "Progress and change are rarely seen as gifts coming to us from above, but they're primarily seen as struggles which originate from below." And our previous speaker talked about the soil, and he talked about innovation. And when we look at soil, when we look at innovation, there are few places on this earth where, as far as I'm concerned, you can find a better analogy for innovation, change, and progress than the deserts of this world. Now, I've had the fortunate experience of spending 9 years living in Namibia, so I know a little bit about deserts. And as a corporate trainer and as somebody who continually works with innovation teams, it's a struggle to find people who really embrace innovation right from the word go. People want to innovate. They want to change. They're attracted by this beautiful thought of change and this wonderful vision of the future ahead of us. But the reality is that people are often very scared to change. And it's a struggle that you see not only within people, but it's a struggle that you can actually see very clearly in the desert as well. And I'd like to take you quickly this evening to the Namib Desert. And if you look at the sign or the picture in front of you, you see very clearly the Namib Desert from the air. It's one of the oldest deserts in the world. It's one of the driest deserts. And it's a beautiful desert when we're talking about innovation, because you have on the one side, coming up from the south, these massive, great, big, powerful, towering dunes that are pushing forward, driven by the trade winds coming up off the Antarctic. And slowly they're making their way across to the north. So it's a little bit like the analogy of business and change and the fact that the industries that we're in are continually changing and moving forward and progressing. But all of a sudden, in this picture, you see a line, and that's the river, in this case, the Kusep River. And to the north of that river, you see barren desert, a desert of rock, void of sand. And that's a little bit like the struggle and the process regarding innovation. On the one hand, our organizations, our industries are driven and being pushed along by innovation and the need to change. And on the other hand, there's this dividing line that we find where some companies make that jump, some products make that jump, and others don't. And I don't need to tell you, because every time that you hear about innovation, you hear about companies that just did not make the cut. So what we're going to do today is look at one of the things that I think is fundamental when you are looking at innovating. And innovation, ladies and gentlemen, is not the goal on its own. Our first speaker mentioned that. Innovation should never be the goal. There should be a higher calling, if I can call it that. There should be a reason behind that innovation. And if we're looking at the desert in this case, that reason should be to find a way to bridge the gap, to cross that river, to get to that wilderness on the other side. And you have the problem. You have this insurmountable problem that lies in front of you. And in this case, it's a riverbed. There's some sort of disruption in your industry, some sort of need that's not being met. And that river, there's one thing that you do know about it. It's not coming down in flood right now. But in a couple of years' time, it will come down. And things that change the world around you, rains falling hundreds of kilometers away in the Hoogland mountain, will fuel this river and send it running miles out into the desert until it wipes away all the sand that's come across. And the beautiful thing about this picture is when you're in the desert and you're standing near the base, you can actually stand and hear the waterfalls of sand slowly cascading down. And it's like the inevitable progress that we have in our industries. There's movement there. Even when we cannot see it, even when we think that we cannot influence it, industry is changing. Our organizations are changing. Our society is changing. So the struggle becomes, how do you, as that grain of sand, Make sure that you cross that river before that deluge arrives and changes your industry forever. Now, we have all these fancy schmancy words for that, and we call it disruptive innovation, and we call it lean change, and everything else. And there's so many words, and they're good words. But they take us away from the essence of what is really at stake. And what is really at stake is the fact that if we do not change ourselves, we will be pushed over into the abyss. And as much as we'd like to, we can hold on to the past, but we've got to jump across that riverbed. Now, there's a story about a ship that was traveling across the Atlantic Ocean from Swakopmund in Namibia down to Cape Town. And it was a well-built ship. It was German-built. Now, ladies and gentlemen, you know German-built usually means it's pretty good, right? Okay? We have standards. This was a German-built ship. It was called the Edward Bolen. And in 1909, it set sail from Swakopmund down to Cape Town, which is a journey by sea of approximately 1,400 kilometers. It hugged the coast, a very treacherous coast, a coast called the Skeleton Coast. And it hugged it because there was a lot of mist, and there was no clarity where they should go. And it's a lot like organizations today. We know that we've got an end destination, but sometimes there's a lot of fog and things happening in the industry which are clouding our vision. So the Edward Bolen went along the coast, and a couple of kilometers down south of Walvis Bay, at a place called Conception Bay, it ran aground. Now that's not really such an interesting story, because plenty of ships run aground, and particularly on the Skeleton Coast in Namibia, which is absolutely strewn with graveyards of ships. But the interesting thing about the Edward Bolen is that it's still there to this day. Well, it's actually also not very interesting. But what is interesting about the Edward Bolen is when you look at it now, it's no longer next to the beach. In fact, it lies about 800 meters inland, away from the Atlantic Ocean. And no, guys, there were no shipwreck survivors who sort of drug that thing into the desert on its own. But the desert encroached it, surrounded it, and pushed forward. And that's a beautiful analogy for change within industry. Because if we allow our companies, if we allow our progress to be halted, and we don't do something about it, we are going to find that the desert will encroach and will overrule us entirely. So that's something to think about. First of all, why are we wanting to change? Second of all, change so that you can jump over that riverbed and head into the unmarked territories beyond. And third of all, if something happens, then move on. You see, there's no clear defining line between the present and the future. The shores are being changed and shifted continually. So what we need to do is make sure that when we have plans in place as businesses, when we have plans in place for technology, that we act fast. Because even the rain in the desert, when it does come, when those opportunities arise, and they will arise sometimes, ladies and gentlemen, if you don't grab in very, very quickly, you're going to see your dreams crack up, dry out, and disappear. So you need to become quick. You need to become agile. You need to become lean. Because otherwise the bleached bones of your product, your business, your idea, will lie on the shores for everyone to see and serve either as a warning or for over-eager business graduates to analyze and to make marketing plans around. Progress isn't difficult. Progress is simple. Just got to keep on going. But it's not easy, ladies and gentlemen. So what we need to do is we need to have a specific thought about where we want to be. We need to see the beauty in those challenges that we have in front of us. And we need to start working on a way to move through the desert and to make it clear. Now, I can't share with you all the ways that we can be innovative. And there are beautiful classes and courses and people that train you how to be innovative and to develop lean thinking and how to be technologically savvy. But what you do need to do is realize opportunity when it arrives. And opportunity itself can be very, very fickle. In fact, opportunity is a little bit like the mist that rolls in across the desert every morning. And the Namib Desert is no exception. Every morning, the mist rolls in off the sea for a few minutes. And if we're fast enough, if we're agile enough, and if we're clever enough, we can find ways to harness, even in the midst of this barren wilderness, the opportunities that arise. So like this beautiful beetle, the toktoki beetle, as we call it, we can position ourselves at the right time. But you've got to understand that that positioning at the right time is absolutely crucial. You need to be at the right place, facing the right way, at the right time. So like our earlier speaker said, that sometimes means that you have to go out, iterate, try, develop a minimally viable product, try again. Sometimes you'll come out and you will not have rain. But other days you'll manage to soak up those opportunities that arrive. Now some do it in that way. Other animals do it slightly differently. This cute fellow over here has actually learned how to lick the moisture off his eyes. Okay? Gentlemen, please don't try this with your lady friends. Okay? So take it as a lesson, not as an advice that I'm giving to you. But you've got to find and develop your own way, your own unique way of grabbing onto opportunities and innovation. And in doing so, we not only learn from each other, but we can learn from the desert as well. And one of the most beautiful examples I find in learning from the desert is this little fellow over here. It's the golden wheel spider. And the golden wheel spider lives on scorching hot sands that can run up to 70 degrees centigrade in the middle of the day. So what he does is he digs a little trap underneath the sand, digs himself in, and goes and sits there comfortably. But he's got an enemy. Just like most of us in our businesses have an enemy. And that enemy is an opportunistic carnivore. It's a black wasp. And that wasp likes nothing else than killing the spider. So this spider has developed a way to be totally different than all the other spiders. Because what do you do with 8 legs? You run, right? Oh, not the golden wheel spider. He does cartwheels across the sand. And the reason that this is essential is because those cartwheels are a manner of thinking out of the box, of taking your appendages, of taking what you have and adjusting it and doing something that's totally contrarian to the popular belief. In fact, that little spider, when he's running along, can move at about 1 meter a second. When he's cartwheeling, he can go up to 10 meters per second. Okay, so you can imagine what sort of advantages this gives him. So in your thinking, don't just think along the way everybody else would think, but think innovatively. Think in a different way. Think, how can I do this? How can I make this threat that's in my environment work for me? And we need to do that quickly. We need to think it through. And if at all possible, don't be scared to go routes that no other people have taken before. Don't look for the well-trodden trails that everybody else has followed. But innovate, try, experiment. And when you have a bright idea and you mention that to a group of friends and 80% packs up laughing, you've got a brilliant idea, and you stick to that idea, and you work it out, and you try, and you go for it, and you develop it. Because the reality is, not everybody will support your ideas. Not everybody will support your innovation. But you've got to try it. Because those that stick to tried and true things, like building a nice German house in the middle of the desert, will inevitably find that as time progresses, this is all that's left. So look at your environments. Look at the opportunities around you. Develop your strategies. Don't be scared to try something innovative and totally out of the box. Develop, test, develop, test. Keep working. And above all, know that there's one true thing about the desert that counts for innovation as well. The desert may be a horribly scary, dry, lonesome, dreary-looking place on the surface, just like innovation can be. But when you look closely, the desert is filled with life, teeming with sound, and above all, incredibly, incredibly beautiful. Dream big, look up at the stars, and go for it. Thank you.